Does your child melt down over the simplest requests? Like we're talking about brushing teeth, getting dressed, even fun stuff like, hey, let's go get ice cream. And you're standing there thinking, what is happening right now? You've tried all the things, the reward charts, the consequences, the super calm mom voice where you're basically a Zen master on the outside while screaming on the inside. Nothing works. And here's the part that breaks your heart. Everyone around you, teachers, therapists, even well-meaning family members, they're all just saying it's a behavior problem and that you need to be firmer, set more boundaries, be more consistent. But you can just see it in your child's face that every time you make a request, there's a flash of panic, the way their whole body goes rigid and how they completely shut down or are just ready to explode when they genuinely want to do that thing. So you're exhausted. You've tried everything the experts suggest, and what works for one autism parent or another autism parent is just not working for you. And if I'm being totally honest, you're probably wondering if you're just failing at this whole parenting thing. Let me tell you, my friend, you're not. You're not failing. What you're experiencing has a name. And once you understand what's really happening, I promise you, everything starts to click into place. And so today, we're diving into why everyday demands can feel like literal threats to your child's nervous system. And even better, I'm giving you real strategies that actually work. So grab your coffee, and let's be real, this could be your third cup. But get comfortable, and let's figure this out together. You've got this, and I've got you.
Hi, I'm Farah Danish. Welcome to my Calm Autism Mom podcast. I'm a certified brain gym movement facilitator, former special educator, and a mindset coach. Through my podcast, I bring together parents, experts from educational, psychology, and medical communities to share innovative insights on parenting and supporting individuals on the spectrum. My mission is simple: to continuously learn and share the latest autism-related news and strategies, bringing you powerful conversations and practical solutions you can use right now. So, if you're an autism mom searching for answers, support, or just some real inspiration, you're in exactly the right place, my friend. Let's transform your autism parenting journey starting right now. Hi, everyone. I have with me Jessica Townsend, mom to twins with ASD, ADHD, and PDA, also known as Pathological Demand Avoidance. That's quite a mouthful. But today, in this session, we will be taking a deep dive into why and what PDA is, how to recognize it, and how can we effectively support individuals with PDA both at home and at school. So join me in welcoming Jessie. Jessie, great to have you here.
Hi, Farah. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very passionate about advocating for PDA because I do feel it's largely misunderstood generally. It's just there's a level of, I think if they don't display it, if they're an internalizer, there's a level of sort of lived experience from parents that might not be believed. And then, parents are really struggling sometimes to get buy-in from schools, from teachers, and from medical professionals. And it varies wherever you are in the world as well to the level of it, of sort of diagnosis also.
I'm going to ask you that it's not an official diagnosis, is it?
No.
Not right.
Not an official diagnosis. So it is currently in the UK. I mean, I have heard of people that have had their children that have got a primary diagnosis, but it generally will always sit between a profile of ASD or ADHD.
Exactly. That was my next question. That is it predominantly found in individuals with ASD and ADHD, or is it just across neurodivergent?
I think it has to be, because it's not in the DSM-5 manual, so it has to be profiled within another neurodivergent sort of diagnosis, but the primary ones are ASD and ADHD.
So I understand that you help families as well navigate this, right? Talk to me about your personal journey with PDA. Like, how did you know that there is something like PDA? Because as a
as a mom to a child with ADHD and a child on the spectrum, I have often seen it as a skill that they need to learn, that initiating a task from is something that they just need to learn. I never saw it as, as something that is physically difficult for them to do. So how did you find this? Like, how did you come across this?
When the twins were in nursery was sort of the back end of nursery, preparing them for primary school. Our youngest twin, it just started to get more and more dysregulated, and it became like the behaviour started to get quite explosive. And somebody had mentioned it to us at like nursery, and we were like, never even heard of it. And then they started primary school, and it just kind of got really out of control, like the dysregulated behaviour, like quite explosive. He was so stressed out all the time, but he just couldn't follow, not that he couldn't follow instructions, but it was because Maxie's autistic as well. There's like the noise, the sensory processing, but it's the anxiety that comes with it. It's PDA is high levels of anxiety. So the amygdala in their brain that registers threat, like for you and I, like say, if you're on the Shakespeare Road and you're doing 70 miles an hour and it suddenly comes to a stop, you get that moment, don't you, of like that fear and you're like, oh my goodness, like, because your amygdala is like recognizing threat. Children with PDA, their brain is constantly in it. So they're constantly scanning everything, looking, and they see everything. They see everything as a threat, which is a demand. So then you'll get the kickback of sort of, and a lot of, if they're an externalizer, so obviously they can throw things, they can get really upset. But then if you get internalizing, the challenge then that parents have is that they keep it all in and then they can explode when they get home.
Yeah, I was going to just ask you that how difficult would it be? Is it for families to navigate this? Like,
Internalizing PDAs are really, I say I'm quite blessed, but Max is an externalizer. So because people have witnessed it, we've got better support, i.e. through the mainstream schooling system. Maxie didn't last very long in mainstream school. But the parents that have internalizers, it can be very much like at school, it can be very much that story of, well, we don't see that behaviour here, so they're absolutely fine. But then what happens is, because they're wearing a mask, when they get home, it can be even more
worse.
out,
Yeah. Oh my God. So let's take a step back. What does typically PDA look like for, like, if I am to be as a mom and I have a child on the spectrum, what are the characteristics? So what would it just look like? If a simple
can go under they can, reluctance to do anything like a normal task, like, getting shoes on, explosive behavior. Their behavior can really vary as well, can be really up and down. They appear quite social, but sometimes they lack that social belonging. And just a general reluctance they just, unless things are worded correctly, they can find it very, very difficult to be able to follow instructions. And some of the other key characteristics are that they may, if they're internalized, that they will try and fit into the surroundings by them. But then obviously there will be sort of clues around that there is, unless you're like an occupational therapist or an education psychologist and you've got a bit of an experience, it can go quite under the radar for quite a long time. And you get quite a lot of children that they struggle in school. But what will happen is there will be signs that they will flip between sort of friendship groups. They might watch people. They appear to be sociable, but they will always take a bit of a step back. And yeah, it's a hard thing to navigate.
What do you mean when you say they take a step back? Like, what happens in that friend circle where they feel they need to take a step back?
Well, they can sabotage friendships because what they want to do is they want to take control of it, but because they need to be in control all the time, if other children don't quite understand it, then what can happen is they can sabotage friendships. They can also, they always appear very social, but it's the demand of conforming to everybody else that they will struggle with. And all children have meltdowns, and of course they do. They're children. That's just what happens. But what happens, they can be explosive, like throwing things, hitting, spitting, kicking, screaming and shouting are some of the ones that we see quite regularly, more so.
I'm just thinking from my past experiences when I've worked with children, and would a child struggling with transitioning, would he come under PDA as well?
I mean, anything that a child has to do is incredibly difficult for a child with PDA, but transitions can take a lot of work also. And that could just be transitioning from the house to get outside, getting shoes on. Because anything you may ask them to do, if it comes across as a threat, their amygdala is going to start warning them that they can't do it. And it is predominantly driven by high levels of anxiety. So we saw quite a lot of anxiety through mainstream schools, sort of that somatic sort of not feeling very well, of having tummy ache, but like just the general reluctantness to not want to go in because they were trying to not want to do it to get themselves stressed out.
So how are your boys being supported in school now, given that you
So,
know about?
yeah, so I've got twins, but only Max. They're both diagnosed with ADHD, but it's only Maxie that's got the ASD and the ADHD and PDA profile. Mainstream school, it wasn't the right fit for him at all, and that became very apparent within about 8 weeks of starting. Just like the whole open plan, the classroom environment, the expectations of all sitting together, it's very loud. And the UK national curriculum is very rigid. He just couldn't do it. So he ended up being on a reduced timetable quite quickly, because just the going in, the days, just how the day is planned out. He had a teaching assistant quite early on, and he was removed from the main classroom and sort of sat at sat away. But then again, with high levels of anxiety, it made him feel, that it's got to be that equality, and he felt very different because he wasn't in the classroom. Yeah, exactly. But it was for the best for him, but also he really struggled with that because he felt different.
Yeah, because he's obviously comparing himself to another child. Like, they sitting there and, am I broken? Am I, all sorts of thoughts.
Yeah.
Right, like that would be true for anyone. But is this a diagnosis that a child can lose eventually if supported properly, or if?
No, so it is a disability. So it's never going to go away. He's never going to grow out of it.
Okay. Okay. Right. And what are your tips at home, Jessie, for a mom who struggles with a child who shows signs of PDA? How would a mom support her child at home, especially the explosive kind?
Yeah, I think you've got to be really, really sure that your child has got a PDA profile for starters, because there's people say, I get quite a lot of people message me saying, oh, my son's autistic, I think he's got PDA, but you can have autistic burnout, which might mirror the same
Symptom.
so and then you can have PDA burnout. Max had PDA burnout from the stress of just trying to go to school. So it's trying to keep it as low demand as possible, and like not putting too much demand on them. And a lot of the time we do have to do quite a lot of stuff for him, which he's more than capable of doing around the house. But at that time, in that moment, he just can't do it himself. And I always say that if you use the PANDA approach from the PDA Society, so they've got some really good resources, but the PANDA approach is a 5-letter acronym, and it's prioritize what you're doing. So is it really important they do this? Do they have to go to the shop with you? Anxiety management, negotiation. And they've got some really, really, really good resources. But the PANDA approach is really helpful.
And
And
okay.
and it's always something that I say that parents should always try and adopt first, because it's about, I know we always want to get out and do things with our own children, but sometimes the reality is you have to pick your battles wisely, and you have to think, is this going to work? And you can kind of tell some days how it's going to go, but then some days it could be a nice, quite calm morning, but it might just be one thing that then puts that scale off.
Right. And
Yeah.
you have mentioned, I've seen this on your Instagram account, about the role language plays. What's the best way to communicate and talk to a child like that, to give them instructions
Yeah.
or to get them to?
So Linda K. Murphy wrote a book called Declarative Language, and that's all about the way in which you say and drop in observational statements, like declarative statements. Instead of saying you need to get your shoes on, it's like, I've put your shoes next to you. And it's about making an observation. So say if Maxie wanted a drink, instead of saying you need to come and get your drink now, that might be met with, it's seen as a demand. So it's like your drink's on the side. And it's like an observation so that it's not threatening to them, but it's inviting them to come and sort of get it. And if worst case fails, and it's kind of, and the kind of language, it's, I wonder if we can, but you've got to be careful with declarative language, because I think the older they get, the more in tune they will get to it. So it's about using then declarative statements to sort of get them to not buy in, but if your parents, probably might have to go and take other children to school. You've got to do normal mum things. Like this is the other thing. You can't be housebound all the time. And you do have to. It's difficult to master declarative language and declarative statements. But if anybody's watching this, I would suggest reading Linda K. Murphy's Declarative Language book. It's really good. It is quite hard going, but it's also available on Audible. So it's really good if you're listening to it. But there's some good set scripts in there that you can adopt. For us trying to get out the house sometimes in the morning, because Maxie goes to a specialist school now, that can be quite difficult.
So with the families that you've supported, Jessie, do all their kids go to specialized schools, or some of them still go to mainstream school?
The reality is, Farah, quite a lot of them can't access school at the moment. Some of them are waiting to get a specialist school placement. Some of them are still fighting. So here in the UK, we have an EHCP, which is an education help care plan. And it's for parents for children that are neurodivergent that can support them in school. And sort of every child that you get an IEP, which is like an individualised education plan, but when you need support from the local authorities, so it may be funding for your child at school, maybe to get them out of the mainstream school. So quite a lot of them are sort of battling, trying to get EHCPs, because again, it can completely depend on who does the EHCP. So if they warrant, it's a PDA profile. And like I said, because it's not an actual diagnosis, it's not in the DSM-5 manual, that can be really difficult for a lot of parents to navigate. So some of them are, banging their head against a brick wall because they're sort of said, oh, well, we don't see this behaviour at school, because they internalise it and they've got that mask on the whole time. And then when they get home, it's, explosive. So, there's a real mix. Quite a lot of them, I'd say maybe 70-75% of the parents that are in my community, their children are currently in burnout and have been through school, or are currently being homeschooled due to the impact that it's had on their life, sort of going through the mainstream system.
Oh, that's huge.
It's really sad.
It is. And the fact that it's quite confusing, and it's not as commonly understood, this diagnosis. I'm talking about this part of the world where PDA, I still haven't. I mean, I hear these symptoms, like these characteristics, not symptoms, characteristics that you've just described. My child comes from school and they're a totally different person. I hear all those characteristics, but nobody knows that that's what it is as PDA. So how are they supposed to explain that to the child's teacher?
I think there's a lot of self-advocation for your child that you need to do. And I think here in the UK, it's becoming more of not a thing, because that sounds like it's not a real thing, but because it's becoming more of a more talked about topic, because you've obviously then got ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder, which I think is a lot more common and it's more understood. PDA is it's a neurological disability, so it's never going to go either.
Oh,
whereas
okay.
ODD.
Also, that's the difference.
Yes, well, ODD is ODD, my understanding, and forgive me if I've got this wrong, but ODD, because I don't know a lot about ODD, ODD is more of that they just won't do something. It's oppositional, whereas PDA, pathological, it's like instilled in them because it's in their brain, because it's their amygdala that it affects, that they're always on that high alert. That's why PDA, that's why it's got that's why it's got the word pathological in it. Whereas, in America, they don't call it pathological demand avoidance. In America, they call it pervasive drive for autonomy, because they need to have a constant level of autonomy. And if their autonomy is lost, then that's when you see the high levels of anxiety. So it's that need to constantly be in control.
Yes. A lot of, this is what I've heard, that oppositional defiance disorder is really a parenting problem.
Yeah, sometimes overlaps. And that could be, and that's, I think parents get the brunt end of the stick, I think, a lot of the time when it comes to raising neurodivergent children, or even a child that's got ODD. It is they are it's a legitimate condition, but it's trying to understand it and then fitting in that with your normal life. And if you've got neurotypical children, like we've got an older son and he's nearly 17 and he's neurotypical, and he's struggled quite a lot with trying to understand PDA and how sometimes his little brother can do things, when I always think of it. So PDA, if you think about it, you get two dials. There's a tolerance and there's a demand. And when they've got a low tolerance, you're not going to be able to get anything done. So the demand then needs to be the lowest it can possibly be. But when they've got a higher tolerance, then you can push the demand a bit more because they've got a higher tolerance threshold that day. And you can't ever prepare for what might be a high tolerance day or a low tolerance day. It is literally what their brain can cope with that day. There's quite a lot of moving cogs to it, I think, as well. Like sleep's one. That can be, sleep's one, waking up early, sort of.
Medication, do they?
So we are currently, Maxie's not on any medication just because we've put more, now he's in the right school setting. He goes to a specialist school and his anxiety is much, much lower than, it was quite explosive and out of control when he was in the mainstream system because it was just too much for him. But now they have a trauma, his specialist school does trauma-informed teaching, so they meet the child where he is, not where they think he should be for his age. So he's obviously well more comfortable at school, he's more capable, he feels safe, because that's the other thing with children with PDA, is that anxiety makes them feel completely not in a safe place.
And culturally, Jessie, I have to tell you that for Asians, our society is very culturally, not very compliance driven. So you wouldn't know the difference between PDA or is this just a child who's voicing their disapproval or displeasure, whatever it is. But he didn't say anything wrong. It's just culturally we're used to just say yes to anyone who's older than us or to a teacher.
Yeah, totally. I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East over the years, and that is exactly it. It's, there's always that cultural battle of, and also dependent on, there's also a bit of I would say what's the word? There's a bias on it that it's more in boys than it is in girls. But girls generally, whether or not it's ASD or ADHD, girls are generally better at masking because they're girls, whereas boys they're boisterous anyway, they're boys. So they display their emotions a lot easier, whereas girls can. Well, I've got quite a few parents who have got daughters, and I'd say probably the majority of them, their daughters have carried it off quite well to a certain point, like much later in say maybe early teens to some of the other girls that are very explosive, but the majority, there's always there is a bias that it's more for boys, but I don't think it is. I think that girls are just better at masking it.
Yeah, and I would imagine girls who are good at masking it eventually, I'm not generalizing this, but most of them do then end up with depression and, because they just
Burnout.
Exactly. And then they find it very difficult to explain this to, yeah. I know certain cases where they find it very difficult to explain this to their own parents because they don't understand what it is, or to even admit that there is something wrong, there is something different about the way I function. In terms of recognized approaches, is you suggested language being one.
Language, and also the key, I just think the key is to really just pick your battles and prioritize with them and compromise. And that goes back to the PDA Panda Society approach. It's some days you've just got to take it on the chin and say, this isn't going to work today, and if you have to cancel plans, you have to cancel plans, because it can get explosive behavior wise. And there's nothing worse when you're out in public and you just kind of think, oh, we probably should have stayed at home today. And you think, oh no, I'll go outside. No, we're going to go outside. And then it's always the day. And I've been caught out on this many a times. I'm like, right, no, we are definitely going to go out today. We're definitely going to go out. And then we get out and I think I really shouldn't have actually pushed this. I should have listened to my gut instinct, and I should have maybe have just not pushed it, because it is about picking your battles and prioritizing. And, maybe I shouldn't have done this way today.
So, okay, how would you, being a parent of a neurotypical neurodiverse, how do you train your child who's neurotypical to be around
with great difficulty, Farah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it. Every day's a learning day. I think he has got better the older he has got. Like, he will be 17 in a couple of months. And I think it was really, really difficult when the twins started at mainstream, because there was quite a lot of stress. You know, my husband and I both work. We've both got really good careers, and everything kind of did have to come to a bit of a standstill. So the priority was making sure, you know, Maxie was going to school for 3 hours a week at one point for nearly about a year, while we were fighting through the system to get him a specialist school place. And I think our neurotypical son, I think he is getting better at recognising things that his brother does that he knows might aggravate him, and then might potentially start a bit of a snowball effect of behaviour, will then start to, you know, snowball and get a little bit worse. But also, I think because Max is ASD, he likes to sit in the same places. He likes to eat the same food. He likes to do certain things the same. But also put that cross with ADHD, that he can get quite restless and he can be quite frantic. But I think with my eldest son is starting to realise that, a perfect example, our sofa, Maxie will only sit on one seat, and it's his seat, and he will only sit on that seat. And if anybody else sits on that seat, he gets very upset. And it's just about recognising, if you kind of almost have to ask permission if you can sit on his spot on the sofa, because if you don't, he will not have any problem telling you to get out. So it's about recognising what his little quirks are that kind of diffuse anything. And the sofa one is one that will drive him, tip him over the edge. If somebody else is sat there, and you have to move, otherwise something will kick off. And it's sort of like recognising those sort of things. And there's a few key little sort of, not tasks, there's a few key little quirks that Max has got. Like, he always wants to sit on the same space at the table, but sometimes the dinner table, it's quite a big demand. It's the end of the day, and even though he goes to a specialist school, he still had a lot of demands put on him throughout the entire day. Sometimes when he gets home, the end of the day, you know, like eating dinner, everybody, it can be quite hectic. Sometimes he will be allowed to not sit at the dinner room table. Like, he'll sit on the floor quite often, or he'll sit separately from us, or has his dinner away from us, because you can't sometimes even talk across the table, because it's just too much for him.
I can understand that as a mom.
Yeah, but
Right.
again, it's a generational thing, Farah, because how my husband and I were brought up, you sat down at the dinner table every single night and had dinner with your parents. That's a generation thing, isn't it? That's how I was brought up. And I think a lot of the ways in which we parent Maxie, well, and the children, all three of them now, it's made us really actually sit and question the ways in which we were brought up. Because I think when you become a parent, you parent how your parents parented you.
Exactly.
And that, you know, I had an amazing childhood, but there are some things that my parents did that I look back on now and I think, I don't really think that doesn't really fit now. I don't think it's for a neurotypical or a neurodivergent child. But it's funny, sort of, you know, these ways that you adopt just because your parents did, and actually if it doesn't fit. And that was really quite hard for my husband to let go of, because he was like, I just want to sit down and have dinner with my wife and kid. And the reality is, like, you can't, because Max's neurological part of his brain, he's at breaking point at come 6-7 o'clock at night for dinner time.
Yeah, I completely hear you there. My kids still, sometimes they want to watch TV when they're eating, but then
We have the television on, and this is another thing. Like, the TV was never on in my house when I had dinner. It was never on at my husband's.
Oh.
But it's a diversionary tactic at the dining room table. And actually, I think my husband worked out quite early on that actually it's just easier to have the television on at dinner time. Like, end of. It's just easier.
Everyone on the table.
Yeah, it's easy. And it stops, you know, it sort of blowing up and everybody arguing. So it's one of those, again, that you kind of generationally, how you've been brought up, you've had to let slide and just say, you know, this doesn't serve our family. Yeah, it served us, but it's not going to serve my family.
Absolutely. This was really interesting, Jessie. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for walking us through PDA. And
Thank you.
I hope moms watching this or fathers watching this can take some valuable information on how they can support their children both at home and possibly give them some answers. It's just not their kids being jerks. It is a problem. It is physically difficult for them to follow through on demands. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Farah.